Good morning. My name is Christine, and I'll be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Pipeline SMS Tools webinar. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. Dave Merck from API, you may begin your conference.
All right, great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Really appreciate everybody getting on the webinar this morning. This is the second in a series of 4 that we're going to be completing over the next few months as we roll out the maturity model and our tools for implementing the safety management systems in RP 1173. Based on the number of callers who have registered for the webinar, great turnout. Really appreciate everybody's participation today. I think we're close to 100 in total who have registered and are calling in for the webinar. You know, we've been at it now for the better part of 2 years with implementation since the publication 1173, and we're really now hitting one of the most important phases of SMS implementation. That's really starting to take a look at, as an industry, both on the gas and liquid pipeline side, how we're doing, how much progress are we making, how are we doing along the maturity curve with implementation, recognizing, you know, as we've used the saying before, this is a journey, not a destination, and we recognize, you know, as we are implementing and we are getting to that phase where we're starting to take a look at measuring where we are from a progress standpoint, we recognize that everybody's going to be at a different place along that journey, and that will probably be true for the foreseeable future, just based on you know, the degree of implementation by companies and organizations. So that said, as I mentioned, this is the second training to support all of you as the implementers for SMS along that journey, and what we're hoping to accomplish today in the hour is to really just give you a snapshot of some of the tools. One that we just rolled out recently, the implementation tool, as well as some of the others that are coming and will be rolled out here soon. And just, again, to give you kind of a feel for what the tools are, how you can use the tools, and we're going to do that with several speakers today. We're going to, once I wrap up here the introduction, we're going to turn it over to Anne-Marie Kaiser with Marathon Petroleum. She's going to talk about the maturity model. And Bill Bird with RCP is going to talk in a little more depth about some of the tools, the implementation tool, as well as the planning tool, conformance checklist. And then we're going to turn it over to Aaron Duke with the American Petroleum Institute, who's going to give you a little bit more on kind of that final step tool, the evaluation tool, and also just a quick snapshot of the third-party audit program, third-party assessment program that we'll be rolling out as well as part of this package or suite of tools. Aaron, if you're running the slideshow, if we could go to the preface slide, slide 4. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, our goal with these tools is really to support you. All of these tools that we've developed are tools that are meant to be voluntary, to use as you see fit at the point of implementation that you all are along that journey and along that maturity curve. And so, again, it's meant to be voluntary, nothing mandatory about it. And ultimately, the goal is to help you all improve, one, to help you and support you with implementation, but ultimately our ultimate goal is to improve pipeline safety performance. And so operators can fill out the tools for your own company. across the industry and across companies, the answers aren't going to look the same. We expect that. And as I mentioned, companies are going to be at different levels along that maturity curve. And so what we see and what we think is important with these tools is it provides you as an operator the opportunity to take a look at, again, where you are, and then over time you can continue to reevaluate yourself and to really benchmark yourself and see how you're making progress. But also, if you have interest with aggregated data across the industry, you can benchmark across the entire industry as a whole. So you have that opportunity as well to just kind of compare yourself to the industry. Again, all of this is blinded information that's collected and gathered. Company-specific information is shared back, obviously, to you as an organization or as you use it within your organization. And again, the ultimate objective with SMS is really to address that remaining 0.001% of incidents that we do have. It's a transformative, foundational piece for the industry. And, ultimately with these tools, we hope to see where we are with that implementation moving forward. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is the second tool of four, or I'm sorry, second training of four that we're holding. We held one in January on the maturity model. The next training will be in April, and that will be on the third-party audit process. And then we'd love to hear from all of you, or from many of you, in our workshop in June, on June 21st, where we're hoping to get a perspective from operators on how they're using the tools and how well the tools are working for you as companies and as organizations. With that, I don't want to delay any longer. I want to turn it over now to Anne-Marie Kaiser, who's going to talk about, again, just a quick rehash of the maturity model. Probably many of you were on the call in January, and where we had an hour-long session to really walk you through the maturity model and the levels and so forth. So this is really just a quick snapshot of that discussion before jumping into the tools, which are a big part of again, identifying where you are along that maturity curve. So Anne-Marie, are you ready to take over?
Yep, I am.
Okay, passing it to you.
All right, thanks, Dave. Real quick, I'm going to hit the antitrust guidelines before we go farther. Then I'll get in quickly to the maturity model and give you an update like Dave mentioned. It's API's policy to comply with antitrust laws. API staff and member company representatives should observe the following guidance. No discussion or forecasting of prices for goods or services provided by or received by a company. No sharing or discussing any company's confidential or proprietary information. No discussion of any company-specific purchasing plans, merger divestment plans, production information, inventories, or costs. No sharing or discussion of specific company compliance costs unless publicly available. No agreement or discussion regarding the purchase or sale of goods or services. Such decisions are independent company decisions. No discussion of how individual companies intend to respond to potential market or economic scenarios or government action. Discussions are limited to generalities. No disparaging remarks regarding specific vendors, products, or services. If a discussion presents an antitrust issue, raise your concern immediately. If the discussion continues, announce that you are leaving the meeting because you have an antitrust concern, and immediately report your concern to API's Office of the General Counsel and to your own company's counsel. All right, so with all that being said, wanted to hit the maturity model quickly. Just for folks who didn't see the maturity model last time, to kind of give you a platform to jump off from as we get into the tools. But for those who are on the call back in January to go through the maturity model, you'll see that we've made some changes. So wanted to hit those briefly. It's gone through a check and adjust, and I think with good measure, I think what we've come up with will turn out well for the folks that are implementing the tools or using the tools within their company. So if you look at the maturity model itself, the levels 1 through 5 remain the same. The wording under that all remains the same. So that's not where we made the changes. But what you'll notice underneath the maturity model in the tools section is the conformance tool is gone and the third-party audit tool is gone. So they haven't gone away completely, and you'll see it when we flip to the second page, but just wanted to make note that those things have been changed. And the conformance tool is now a checklist. Bill will get into that. Bill Bird will get into that more as we get farther on in the webinar. The changes were made to streamline the tools that we have and make sure they flow together. So you can see on this slide, we've got the getting started, which is the same as it was before. And then you drop into the planning tool, which is the same as before. Implementation tool is the same as before. But then another change that you'll see is the effectiveness tool is now called the evaluation tool. And we did that to make sure we are staying true to the RP in the section where it talks about evaluation. So you're evaluating your program, but you're measuring effectiveness. So if you remember back to the first page of the slide of the maturity model, you'll see where effectiveness is at. So slight name change there to be a little more true to the RP. Here you'll see the conformance checklist is listed, and it's a help to get you to all the API RP 1173 shell statements. So you can use it as a supplement to the implementation and evaluation tools. But it's not needed because the evaluation tool will help you pick up those pieces and make sure you are complying with the RP. And then you'll notice there's a peer-to-peer sharing. That's been on the maturity model from the get-go, and there's also been a tool out there on pipeline.sms.org for a while as well. And that's really relevant at any point in your journey to get together with your peers, and that tool is out there on the website, and it helps give you a structure of how you'd run one of those peer-to-peer sharing meetings. So by all means, as you go and talk to other operators, you can use that tool to help you set up those calls if you're not quite sure of how to do that or what to talk about. And then the voluntary API third-party audit program is still there on the bottom as well. It is obviously voluntary, but it matches up a lot with the evaluation tool, and Aaron Duke with API will get into that more. So those are the changes in a nutshell that we made to the maturity model, and we're going to open it up for questions. We'll give folks about 5 minutes to ask questions. So Christine, if you could open the line up to see if any folks have questions on the maturity model or the updates that we made.
At this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for a brief moment. And again, for any questions, that's star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no questions at this time.
Okay, great. Since there's no questions, just a reminder that the updated maturity model is available on pipeline.sms.org. And with that, I will turn it over to Bill Bird with RCP to go through the Pipeline SMS tools.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Aaron, take the next slide. So the planning tool, what we used to refer to as the gap analysis tool, it's more than just gap analysis. That's been out there for almost 2 years now. And the idea was we broke the RP into 71 questions with several questions around each element of the RP at a fairly high level. And then we've got an excerpt of just one couple of rows of that spreadsheet. And for that requirement, what some examples of things that you might have in place that would satisfy that requirement, and then what do you actually have that might satisfy the requirement? Do you have a gap or not? If so, describe what the gap is. Do you need a new program, or you just need to make some minor modifications? And then describe the potential actions that you think you ought to take to comply with the requirements of the RP. And then you can check whether you think it's required or just an optional thing that you can do, and then give it a priority, who owns it, what's the due date, and there are other columns that you can use for that for the purpose. And you end up with as many actions as you think of out of the planning. So you could end up with 10 follow-up actions or 1,000 follow-up actions. It's completely up to you. It's just what you decide you need to do in order to implement the RP on your initial pass. So the planning tool helps you develop that plan by identifying the gaps for the RP, looking at where your programs are today, and deciding or coming up with options for how you can continue to satisfy the RP. So everybody's planning tool is going to look different if you use it at all. And other companies, have their own way of doing this, or they've, there's nothing mandatory about the planning tool. It's just there to help people get started and provide some structure around addressing the various requirements of the recommended practice. So that's, like I said, that's been posted on the website with an instruction document that explains how the spreadsheet works for a couple of years now. So if you go to the next slide. The next tool is what we call the implementation tool. And it's very similar to the planning tool, and it has the same 71 questions that describe the major requirements of the recommended practice. It's not rigorous in that regard. There's a conformance checklist we'll talk about later is a more rigorous version, but this is still at a fairly high level, several questions around each element of the RP, and if you use the planning tool to lay out your plan, then it's easy to use the implementation tool to see how you've been progressing in the implementation of that plan. So you can assign yourself different maturity levels on the maturity model. You'll notice that the spreadsheet actually has a level 0, which means you haven't actually started yet. You're still thinking about it. So that's not on the maturity model. Because you haven't got on the maturity model if you're at level 0. But then level 1 is you're planning, level 2 developing, level 3 implement. So by the time you get to level 3, you have done the stuff that you decided you needed to do to close the gaps that your programs had versus the requirements of the ERP. That doesn't mean that your programs are perfect or have been evaluated. That just means they've been developed and that they have been implemented. So you didn't just write the program, but you're actually doing the things that you wrote down in the program. That would be level 3. Level 4 is the level higher than that, which is you're in the continuous improvement process. You're sustaining the programs. You've gone through some cycles of plan, do, check, act. And if that's the case, you might be all the way up to level 4. In each one of these questions, 71 questions, we have some extra verbiage around what would a level 3 program look like for this question versus what would a level 4 program look like for this question. So as you reach that level 3, go into the level 4 kind of maturity, it'll help you decide where you are. At the end of that, there's a level assignment column, which has here it's shaded yellow, 0 to 4. So if you were at level 3, you just put a 3 in it. You can use any degree of numerical precision that makes you happy. So if you think you're a 3.19, you can put 3.19 in there. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. The expectation is that most operators are probably going to use half increments when they're doing these level assignments. So there might be a 2.5 instead of a 2 or a 3, that kind of thing. But it's up to you, and if you feel like you can be more consistent, that's fine. It's just a way for your company to keep track. And there are some simple summary charts that are built into the implementation tool. So if you'll go to the next slide, Aaron. This is a very high-level company summary that just adds all 71 questions together and says how many of them are at level 0, how many are at level 1, how many are 2, 3, 4. Your chart probably wouldn't look very much like this because if you started an implementation program with any zeros, and you probably don't have any ones for long, but we just gave a little bit of every one of them because we wanted to make sure that you could see all the pie chart pieces. So that's a very high level. You can see how your company's progressing towards level 3 and 4. If you go to the next slide, Aaron, this is some of the same information, just charted by element. So you see 10 bars, 10 stacked bars. The first leadership and leadership commitment, that element number 1, stakeholder engagement number 2, so on and so forth. So you've got a stacked bar for each of the 10, and the bars, the segments of the bar are at the bottom most is level 4. So if you're at level 4, you'd have that dark green bar for that question. And if all the questions on an element were at 4, then the whole bar would just be one dark green bar. But if you've got some that are at 4 and then some that are 3, a little lighter green, some questions that are at 2, that's kind of the beige on my computer monitor. And then if you're at level 0 or 1, that's more of the orange bar. So the idea is, as your bar fills up with green, whether it's light green or dark green, you've reached implementation of all the things, all the questions for that element. And then the blue line you see here is an average, it's a numerical average for your questions in that element. So again, it's just a way for you or your company to track progress, say from quarter to quarter or year to year. You can hopefully see the bar chart filling up with green as you develop your programs. Now, these things, since these are self-help tools and you're deciding what level to assign yourself, they're not directly comparable from company to company. One company might be very strict on themselves and what they consider their requirements to be, and other companies might be a little more lenient with themselves. But you still could use these things for benchmarking just to see how your implementation plan is going versus other people's implementation plans. But at the end of the day, you don't know if your programs are really super good and somebody else's are not all that tight, but you're both fully implemented, so you might be all green for both companies. So it's not the evaluation tool will get at that issue. So this is just implementation tool, helps you track implementation. And if you go to the next slide, Aaron, this is actually the same bar chart, but it just shows the light green and dark green segments. So we're not showing anything that's below level 3. And that's another way to show how your company's implementation progress is going by element. So as you get every question in an element to level 3 or better, then your bars will be at 100%. Next. Now, Anne-Marie mentioned that we had a conformance tool, and that now we're calling that the conformance checklist, and it's actually, I think, a more accurate description to call it a checklist. The way that tool was originally developed was we went through the RP and found every individual thing that the RP said you shall or must do, and created a question specifically around that. And in the process, we ended up with 234 individual shall statements. Now, some of those are redundant. You ask basically the same question more than once in different parts of the RP, but we have them all basically verbatim out of the RP to the greatest extent possible. Still keep it within the English language, but just cut and paste as much as possible out of the RP. So what you end up with is a bite-sized version of the RP and 234 individual nuggets of things that are specifically required within the RP. So the idea is that's a checklist that you can use. And you could use it when you're doing your planning tool. You can use it when you're filling out the implementation tool, or later when you're doing the evaluation tool, so that when you're asking those 71 questions in the implementation tool, you can go back to the individual particular statements within the RP and say, well, did we address this particular statement? And that'll help you decide if you're fully implemented or not. So we don't summarize anything out of that. If you see in previous editions of the conformance tool, we had some summaries. We've taken all that out. So So this is just a reference document that you can use. Now, we are building it in to the evaluation tool. So if you use the evaluation tool, you'll by implication, you will have handled the things that are in the performance checklist. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Hey, Bill, you're kind of getting hard to hear.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Okay. So then the evaluation tool used to be called the effectiveness tool, but this is a much more detailed tool that has many more than 71 questions on it. And it's an audit tool that you can determine your conformity and your effectiveness. So there's an audit matrix that's built into that tool where we ask a lot of specific questions about your programs and do they meet the requirements of the RP. And it's not just verbatim out of the RP. So there's some judgment involved in, what do you expect for, audits in your operations program for this or for that. And so we get a little more granular in rating things, but at the end of the day, you're still on a 1 to 4 scale in the audit matrix. And then there is an effectiveness part of the spreadsheet that deals with your KPIs. And that'll be a combination of industry-specific KPIs that everybody gets measured against, and also your company-specific KPIs that you evaluated or you identified as things that you think are relevant to your performance and you wanted to track. They may not be the same things that other people are tracking, but it's important to know whether you're doing good on your own scale for KPIs, whatever those are. So we'll take those certain industry-specific ones and then certain operator-specific ones and average those together. And then the audit score plus the effectiveness score gives you a total score that gets you somewhere from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5. And that correlates with the maturity model. So if you're at level 5, you've got good audit scores for conformance with all the requirements of the RP, and you've got good performance as measured by your KPIs. Now, that tool is, it's not available yet. It's in draft form and it's being piloted by some operators. So we're making some changes to that based off that feedback, but it will eventually be posted prior to our June workshop so that companies can use it for self-evaluations. But it also is going to be used as part of API's third-party audit process, the voluntary process that Aaron is going to talk about, I think, on the next slide, right? So, yeah, I guess, yeah, one more slide for the end summary.
Yeah, so what's that? Sorry. Oh, this isn't working. So yeah, so actually I think now that we've gone through all the tools, thanks Bill, we would like to open it up to any questions and answers for 5 minutes here, just to, if there's any specific questions about the tools. So Christine, if you can.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. Your first question comes from the line of Monica Yawinski from Pacific Gas and Electric. Your line is open.
Yeah, it's Yankowski. As far as the maturity model, it looks like it's more of a broad level from 0 to 4. Are there plans to implement or to develop a maturity model for each element of the management system? So in other words, different levels for each of the elements with criteria for each level?
Well, some of that is in the implementation tool, and it will also be built into the audit matrix. So each one of those questions, you're evaluating where are you on the maturity model from 1 to 4. Now, level 5, since that deals with your overall company performance, is your company improving? That isn't measured at an individual question level. It's measured more at the organizational level. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no further questions at this time. I turn the call back over to Mr. Duke.
Okay, so thanks, Bill and Anne-Marie for the presentation on the tools. So just to talk a little bit about when you can get the tools and where to get them, the implementation team continues to work on tools in these education series of webinars and workshops to help support Industries 1173 implementation initiatives. So the implementation tool and guidance that Bill just talked about are now available on the PSMS website, and that was issued to industry on February 23rd, sort of before the webinar. And as well as the planning tool and the other tools that are currently available on the website. The plan is to release the conformance checklist and guidance over the coming weeks, and that's to help support work toward conformity with all the requirements of the RP. So as was discussed, the conformance checklist gives you that checkpoint to say, okay, have I addressed all these specific requirements in my management system? The evaluation tool and guidance that was referenced earlier will be released prior to the June 2018 workshop that's being planned. And part of that workshop is to be a discussion and review of the evaluation tool and guidance, and also talk about the implementation tool and the use of that. The guidance will include expanded instructions on the auditing process, auditor qualification, how to evaluate implementation against the maturity model, and the scoring details relating to evaluating effectiveness that Bill had talked about. I'm going to show you just briefly where you can get the tools, just to give some guidance on that. So if you go to the website, pipelinesms.org, and you go to the tools section and just select the tools, you'll see the maturity model, and at the bottom of the page, you'll see all the current tools that have been released. So you can see the planning tool, the tool instructions, the implementation tool user guidance, the guidance for system evaluations, the peer-to-peer sharing practices, and then a fact sheet about 1173. So all that stuff's available on the website. And then finally, some of the upcoming SMS items, and here's where I'll talk a little bit about the third-party audit as well. The webinar series, the next series as part of the webinars is going to be this voluntary third-party audit, and that's going to be April 19th, 2018. As indicated earlier, the evaluation tool is going to form the basis for the API voluntary third-party audit program. And it's going to be built around that, and it'll be a standardized audit process using industry qualified auditors and good management system auditing practices. The objective of the voluntary third-party audit program is to provide the operators with a consistent, objective process to provide information for improvement of their management systems, and it'll feed some of the data that's going to be needed for benchmarking operator industry efforts. So looking at the level 4 and level 5 implementation levels, it's to take that information and give an opportunity for operators to benchmark their systems and where they're at with a standardized process. Again, that webinar is planned for April 19th, 2018, and look for more information to come out in mid-March about that. In conjunction with the API Pipeline Conference in April 2018, the annual report will be available from 2017, and the report's being developed with input from the PSMS teams and industry, and is going to provide information on industry's progress with the implementation of the pipeline safety management systems, all the efforts that are going on. Another thing to watch for in conjunction with that is we're redesigning the Pipeline SMS website to be more effective at communicating information and give the tools, easier access to the tools and all the information that industry needs to progress along their journey implementing the SMS. The website redesign is being done in conjunction with individuals from the other trade associations to make sure we're covering all the trades and all supporting both liquids and gas industries operators as well. There'll be finally our tools workshop will be held in June in Houston. The tentative date is June 21st right now, and the workshop will focus on sharing experiences with the tools. So that includes the implementation tool and any piloting that's been done with the evaluation tool. Key input's going to be to the workshop will be the experiences and feedback of the operators industry-wide that have used the tools. And we're in need of volunteers actually to pilot the currently available tools and share their experience as part of the workshop. So if you are interested in volunteering to pilot the tools and share your experiences, please contact the pipeline sms@api.org or reach out to any member of the implementation team that you may know of to provide that feedback and to volunteer to pilot the tools. Part of that would be actively being involved with the workshop as a presenter or in groups presenting their findings using the tools. The SMS implementation team is really interested in all perspectives, and we'd like to get a wide range of perspectives from operators involved gas, liquids, transmission, distribution, and all aspects of the industry. So that's important that we get some volunteers to give us perspectives on their use of the tools. And again, the PSMS implementation team members are available to explain in tools if you're having challenges, how they're intended to work, and address any questions or concerns that you might have. Again, if you're interested in testing and piloting the tools and sharing those experiences input to the June workshop, send an email or contact pipeline sms@api.org or again, any member of the SMS implementation team. So that concludes the information portion of the webinar. What we'd like to do now for the next few minutes is open up the line to any additional questions that you may have, or any discussions regarding the tools or the SMS items listed, the webinars, or any of the other implementation team initiatives that are going on. So Christine, if we can open for questions again.
Thank you. Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. Again, if you would like to ask a question, press star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no questions at this time. I turn the call back over to the presenters.
Okay, well, in closing, just like to say thank you for everybody that's participated. And on behalf of the PSM Industry Implementation team, just say thanks. We hope that the tools and all the education series and other resources are helping and supporting all operators, gas and liquids, along their journey to implementing effective PSMS based on RP 1173. As we go along the journey, applying and using the tools, we really would like to hear from you. You can always contact pipeline sms@api.org or reach out to members of the team that you know. We look forward to seeing you and hearing from you at the June workshop, and watch for more updates through emails and flyers and some messages that'll come out. Bill, Anne Marie, anything to add in closing?
Nope, nothing additional.
Yep. There is one other document that you came across. Can you hear me okay? I know I got a bad connection here.
Yeah.
But on the website, you mentioned the guidance for systems evaluations. So that wasn't one of the things that we were trying to explain today. Since we have a minute, I'll go into that just slightly. So this guidance for systems evaluations document is intended for operators that don't have a robust internal auditing process for things other than accounting. And it walks through, how would you pick team members, what depth of an audit do you want to go through, how many people would you talk to, those kinds of things. And it has a draft audit report form that you can use to fill out when you do your own systems evaluation. None of that is mandatory. It was all just developed to provide a starting point for companies that need help with getting started on doing the evaluations. So don't, if you come across that tool on the website, don't feel like we're recommending you do it that way. We're just providing something that is to help people who don't already have their own way of doing things.
Hey, Aaron, Dave Merck. Hey, one last thing while I have a captive audience as well. I just wanted to mention to everybody, as part of our upcoming annual API Pipeline Conference in April in St. Louis, we're also going to have a pipeline SMS panel with the focus this year being on providing really an operator perspective on implementation. So we're going to have a great panel of 4 companies representing distribution, transmission, both on the gas and liquid side. And it's going to be a real good panel, hearing, again, from operators, similar to what we're hoping to get in the June workshop once we've used some of the tools and piloted some of the tools. So if you can make the conference, again, a good panel there. And just to reiterate what Aaron said, I want to thank everybody for the time today. Hopefully you got a quick overview, snapshot of the tools, maturity model changes to help you as you're making choices and you're implementing SMS. And a big thing for us is, as an implementation team for the industry, is we definitely want to hear from you, not only as part of the use of the tools, but any questions or any issues that arise as you're implementing safety management systems within your company. Feel free to, Aaron gave the website email, pipelinessms.org. You can email us through that, and we can respond or provide you whatever additional support you might need as you're working through this. So again, thank you all for taking the time this morning. Are we good, Aaron?
Any other questions at all? I don't know.
There are no additional audio questions at this time.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
This concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect.